Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Achieve More podcast. My name is Anthony. You can find me on YouTube at Picksburgh. That's where the video format of this podcast will be uploaded. If you want to see our handsome faces, come on over to Picksburgh. And you can also see vlogs that I put out on a weekly basis with my girlfriend as well. Also, my co-host, Michael, over at Huddle Card Collection. How you doing today, Michael?
Great, sir. How are you?
Doing well, man.
Wonderful.
Appreciate you being here with us yet again.
Thank you for having me again.
Awesome, man. Anything new on your channel?
Not a lot of new stuff. Just normal stuff. We'll I think we may be making a couple of tweaks here or there. So be on the lookout. If you're listening, go over to the channel and check it out. Probably gonna be making a few tweaks to the channel as we go forward.
Sweet. Looking forward to seeing what you do, man. He puts out great content, so if you guys aren't subscribed to Huddle Card Collection, please go and do that. But without further ado, we have a very special guest with us today. We have Peter Cobb. He was the head of the V&As in Vermont. He's currently retired. We're going to talk a little bit about retirement. We're going to talk about some books that he's written. So, Peter, without further ado, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience for people that aren't familiar with you yet?
Sure. For 33 years, I was the director of the V&As of Vermont, which is a trade association for the visiting nurse associations. I retired 8 years ago. In that time, I've written 2 novels. One was published in 2022 in January, and it's called To Alice. And it's basically about a visiting nurse or home health aide who gets a little bit too involved with her patients. She has some serious boundary issues. And my second novel is going to be available August 27th in bookstores in Vermont, on Amazon, elsewhere. It's called Some Things Aren't Meant to Be, and it's about a farmer in 1929. And over the next 4 or 5 years, for lots of different reasons, he becomes a priest. And so we get his life in 2 parts. We first meet him in 1961 as he works at a parish in Vermont. And then we immediately go back to his backstory in 1928 and 29. And he's a farmhand on a small hardscrabble farm in Vermont. And we learn about his life that led him up to becoming a priest. And did he fall in love? The answer is yes, he did. Did he have a life beyond being a priest? He certainly did. So it's basically what led him to get where his final journey.
Very interesting.
And here's a copy of it.
Nice. That sounds super
interesting. There we go. Oh, there it is. That's the copy. It'll be available next Tuesday.
Very nice.
Wonderful. So go ahead and mark your calendars, guys, next Tuesday. And actually, I will try to drop this episode to coincide with the release of the book. So that should work out just perfect. So I have a few questions for you, man. So you had a career in healthcare, and what got you into writing? Was this something you always wanted to do? Had you done this as a hobby?
I tried writing novels while I was a married person and working, and I found that nearly impossible for me anyway. You get home from work, it's 5 o'clock, you deal with your children, it's 8 o'clock, and you're too tired to move. So I don't know about anybody else, but I really admire folks who, with a family, can write a book. I found out I couldn't. I did write one. Took me 20 years to write it. I started when I was like 33, 34. I finished it 20 plus years later, and it was absolutely terrible. It was incredibly long. It went on and on. And the writing style at the end of the book wasn't anything like the writing style at the beginning of the book. So I tried as a person and a working person, but I failed. So I tried again once I retired. I wanted to redefine my life because it's my next chapter of my life. And one of those things I've done to do that is to write a book or 2 books.
Are they inspired by your work? By your,
Well, the first one was, yeah. The first book called To Alice was very much for my work. It's about a home health aide with boundary issues, but most of the book is really about her patients. I believe there are 6 different patients, and we get their live story. There's one woman who's turning 100, and we get both her life as a 100-year-old and also her life in the 1930s. We meet a man who uses a wheelchair, and he falls in love, and we follow his life through his love and his marriage. We meet a woman who's on hospice, and we watch her die. One of the chapters is we follow her death, and and how the home health aide reacts to it. So the first book, 100%, was based on my work and the visiting nurses. Now, remember, I wasn't a caregiver. I was the lobbyist and I ran the trade association. But even so, I went on several home care visits every year just to make sure I reminded myself what I was doing. The second book is much less based on events of my life. At least the farming part is. The book alternates from 1961 to 1929. Most of the, and 29, 28. Most of the action takes place in the 1920s, but there is a considerable in the 1960s. The events of the 1960s are more, they're not really based on my life, but they're certainly loosely based on my friends and me. Basically, there's a group of young men and they're seventh graders in the book, and they call themselves the Five Musketeers, and they're kind of nitwits, and they do really stupid stuff. You know, they break into the church, for example, and steal the wine. I don't know if any of you were other Catholics or not, but that was a common altar boy thing to do. They have a stupid contest sliding on their sleds down a hill to see who could come closest to a cement post and not hit it. Well, obviously you know where that's going. So those kids, those five boys, were kind of based loosely, not exactly, but loosely on my friends and me. However, the sections on the farm, which is most of the book, that was totally fictional, based on nothing. In fact, when I sat down to write the book, I had no intention of writing about a farmer, a priest, or a love story. What I wanted to do was write about a coming of age story based loosely on my friends and me at a local Catholic parish in Vermont. But after I finished the first chapter and I reread it, I was intrigued by the priest. I said, well, what? Then I said to myself, why did he become a priest? Does he believe in God? Does he have any questions about God? Does he wonder about why bad things happen to good people? So after the first chapter, I immediately went into the priest's life, and the book is now his story.
Wow. Very cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how do you come up with these stories? Like you said, it was loosely based around you, but then you started to really start developing these characters, and did it just kind of take a life of its own from there?
Yeah, it actually did take it. The first novel was pretty easy, only in the sense that most of the six main characters who were patients, they're basically based on people I knew or my family. Mm-hmm. The woman turning 100 was based on my mom. A lot of the things that happened in there, which seem unbelievable, actually happened. And so that was a little easier. The second novel, since it's so fictional, it was totally unexpected. In fact, I was so surprised that every chapter was a surprise to me. I didn't outline. I had these questions in mind. What is the nature of faith? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why is this guy becoming a priest? Those questions guided my writing, but I didn't have an outline, and every chapter was a surprise until about a little over halfway. Then I said, oh, I know where this is going. So I didn't know where the story was going for probably the book's 74,000 words, 73, something like that. I was around the 50,000 mark before I really knew where I was going.
Oh, wow.
In the 1970s, a very, very long time ago, I worked for 5 years as a reporter and editor. In fact, when I retired, I'm trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my life? I got a lot of dead time here, since I used to work 40, 50, sometimes 60 hours a week, and now I'm not. So one of the first things I did is I called the newspaper that I had worked for in the 1970s. Well, first off, not a single person there remembered me. Most of them were born after I left. And I said to them, you guys want any stories? And they said, nope, not really. And I said, well, how about if I write one feature, and if you don't like it, you don't use it, no big deal. And if you like it, you can use it, and we'll go from there. Well, I don't remember what I wrote about, but they liked the first story. And I've been writing about one story a week now for 8 years.
Wow. That's awesome. So what made you decide it was time to retire? I mean, outside of like age or,
well,
just
I've been there 33 years. Yeah. Retirement is strange. I retired. I had been there 33 years. It seemed like I had given them everything I could give them. I was 64 going on 65. Seemed like a pretty good time to retire. What I didn't expect was once I hit retirement, that life would change so dramatically. Before I retired, I was basically the spokesman for home health and hospice in Vermont. When the newspapers had questions, the reporters would call me. When the state had questions, the state would call me. I negotiated with Medicaid for the rates for the membership. I worked with Blue Cross Blue Shield. I worked with Medicare. And then I retire on June 30th. On July 1st, I get no calls. I'm relevant, then I'm not. So it was an adjustment for me. I didn't expect to be as empty as it was. So I had to figure out, well, what am I going to do with my life here? So the first thing I did, I told you already, is I called the newspaper, and then I started writing for them. The second thing I did is I called 2 volunteer organizations and see if they needed volunteers. So since a couple months into my retirement, once, sometimes twice a week, I drive people who are blind. I drive them to their doctor's appointments, to when they go to the hairdresser, to the dentist, that kind of thing. And then I also, one day a week, I work on Vermont's adult education program. When I first started, I worked with young people who, for whatever reason, typical high school just didn't cut it for them. They just, they dropped out. They didn't get their degree, so I helped them get their degree. But in the last couple of years, they've shifted me over to teaching with people who barely speak English. I worked with a young woman from Peru at first, and now I'm working with a young woman. Well, not young, she's 48. That's younger than I was. Young to me. I worked with a woman from, she's Nicaragua, and she doesn't really speak much English. And I worked with a couple people from, say, Brazil, who also don't speak much English. So we try to work through it. We try to get get them to understanding. The biggest problem is understanding verbally. They can read it fairly easily, but speech is simply fast. So we work on speech. And also with the first woman, actually, she had a college degree and was pretty fluent in English. What she wanted to do was to be able to go to grad school in the US and be able to understand the language here. And what we found out with her was her vocabulary in English was better than mine by a whole lot. I mean, she was really brilliant. But where she screwed up or where she had trouble was idioms, stuff like that, like or you're sitting on the fence. Well, what does that mean? Elvis left the building, huh? So we worked on crazy stuff that we say that doesn't make any sense to a foreign person. And you can think of a million of them. And that's what we worked on. And we also worked on things like the word red. It doesn't change and becomes read. English is tough. With match. In fact, this last week, the people who are really low on English, I brought in a match, a match book. I brought in some socks that I matched. And then I showed them on the computer a chess match. So for them to understand that the word match means at least 3 different things, that's where they get. English is tough. It's very tough for people. We forget how many words are spelled the same and pronounced differently, like read, red. And then I showed them the color red, which is red. I see now. Red is red, but red is when you read the book. And I read the book yesterday. So that's the kind of stuff I work on with the folks from South America.
That's awesome. That's really cool. What led you to do that? Was it just something that was a need that you saw, to fill some of your time, or do you have a passion to work with that demographic?
No, I didn't have a passion to work for it. What I initially thought I would do is I've been writing, even though I wrote my 2 novels after retirement, my job, I wrote all the time. And I even occasionally wrote for professional journals in home health. So I was writing, I thought I would go to this place and help people with their with their writing skills. But what they needed me for wasn't writing, but math. And that was a challenge because I wasn't the greatest math student in the world. So I had to do a lot of memory stuff. Like, for example, the right triangle, A plus B, A squared, B squared, C squared. I forgot all. I had to actually relearn a lot of the stuff that I could teach. So they didn't need me much for teaching writing. What they needed me for was to teach math. But now that I switched to working with folks from South America, what they need me for is simply to help people understand verbal or how we talk. And I did it because I did it because I was home. I'm home now 5 days a week, nothing to do really. I can putz around the house if I want, but just think about all the advertisements that are on television, especially the drug advertisements that are in the news. Look at the retired people in those ads. They're playing pickleball, they're golfing, they're fly fishing in Montana. Gosh, good old time.
Yeah.
I don't fly fish. I don't play pickleball. I don't golf. I don't do any of that junk. I do I bike and I kayak and that kind of stuff, but I don't have time to golf. So how are you going to make your next chapter of your life meaningful? I think people, when they're facing retirement, don't realize that you have a new life. It's different than your old life, and you have to make that life mean something. And think about it. I am now 72. I am going to be 73 in a couple of months. I retired at 64. I've already been 8 years. I'm into my 9th year of retirement. If all goes well, I go another 10, maybe even another 20. Our retirement years could rival our work years. I think I worked about 41, 42 years, maybe 45. My retirement could be 30. So it's something you need to make meaningful in your life, I think. And so I do it now through volunteer and through writing, I guess.
So let me ask you a question. So if you could, right? And so you, at some point as you're working, you have a target date of when you're going to retire. So based off of what you know now, what would you tell yourself who is sitting there mapping out retirement? Hey, July 1st, expect or you're going to need a plan here. Would you go back and what would you tell yourself knowing now what you know?
Yeah, well, I would have contacted the volunteer places earlier. Say, look, I'm going to be available July, whatever it was, 1st or 2nd. I would have done that. I also would have prepared myself for, okay, I'm a real relevant person in this field. And in July 1st, nobody's going to call me. I'm not going to get a call from a reporter. I'm not going to get a call from the state saying, well, what's the rule here on home health? Nobody's going to call me. In fact, the interesting thing about this is you think you're pretty irreplaceable. Believe me, you're not. A year, 2 years later, most of the people in the field barely remember you. So you got to prepare. What you want to do is prepare yourself for that drop off of what you did, because this is a different life. And right now it's a great life. I would not want to go back to working. I still write for the paper. In fact, I've sent them a story yesterday, and I'm interviewing somebody on Thursday for a new story. So I get to do that once or twice a week, and I get to do volunteer work. And for writing, for me, and I don't know if it's for other people, but for me, in order to write successfully, I have to treat it like a job. I can't just say, sit down, I'll write when I feel like it. Because if I write when I feel like it, I'm never getting anything done. So I block off. I just finished the book, so right now I'm free. But I block off Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 6:30 in the morning to 10:30, and I sit in front of the computer, even if I got nothing to write, because if you don't do that, you're never going to finish anything. At least not anything long. You can maybe do a short story, but you sure as heck can't write a novel by sitting down and you feel like it. And that was part of the problem. My first 2 novels. Not that I simply didn't have time to do it. So I would write 3 or 4 pages one day, and then 3 months later, I'd write 3 or 4 pages. Then maybe 6 months later, I'd write 10 pages. And then went on and on and on for 20 years. Well, the beginning of the book and the end of the book weren't even alike. The writing style was different. So if you are serious, if any of your people watching this want to write a book, you got to treat it like a job. You have to give yourself the hours that you're going to work, and you have to sit in front of that computer. And if you can't think of anything, just type "how now brown cow." Doesn't matter. Just keep typing. What I found is, my first chapter, for example, of both books, I knew in my head, so that was easy to do. I wrote the first chapter, and then for the second chapter, if I'm stuck, I sit in front of the computer and I keep reading that first chapter over and over until okay, I know where I'm going, and then I write the next chapter. And then if I'm on the third chapter and again I'm stuck, then I'll say, okay, let's read this others and see where it's going. So some authors, maybe most authors, I'm not sure, but many authors outline. They outline and they outline and they outline. So when they sit down to read, they're all set. They can, but I don't outline. I don't know whether because I'm lazy or because I just can't do it. So what I do is one chapter after next. The chapters for me, it come as a surprise. The first book, I knew the first chapter actually, and I knew the last chapter. but I didn't know anything in between. For this book, for the second book, I knew the first chapter and nothing else until, as I said, halfway, and then I knew where I was going with it. And I knew how I wanted to end it.
So if you sit down on a Monday and you do some stuff, and then Wednesday comes and you're having a little bit of a hard time, and then you go ahead and you sit back down on Friday, do you look back at what you did on Monday to kind of kick in what direction you were going in, or do you automatically kind of know already?
No, well, yeah, sometimes I know, because one of the things about writing is when you're not in front of the computer, the characters, they grab into your head and they won't let go. So you'll be out jogging and you'll get a thought, and sometimes I'll wake up at 2 a.m. and aha. And then sometimes usually I don't go to the computer because I'm too tired, but sometimes I'll wake up at 2, 3 a.m. and I'll say, oh, I know what I should have done. And then the next day I'll do it. Occasionally I do it, but that generally drives my wife nuts. If I start typing at 3 a.m, she'll get up and say, what are you doing? Turn that off. So, and actually one of the reasons I got into writing is I retired and my wife retired a year later, and she gave me an ultimatum. She said, if you think you're following me around all day, think again. So she said, why don't you go into the computer room and do something? So part of it was she kind of pushed me in there thinking, I don't want you to bug me all day. And then of course the COVID came, and was that 20?
Yeah.
And that really spurred me going. Whatever it was in March. Before COVID, I had written about 50,000 words over a year for my first book. COVID hit, and I was in front of the computer straight for like a month and a half, and I finished the book. I wrote 25,000 words in 5 weeks, and I had written 50,000 words in 12 months. So COVID just pushed me right along, because my volunteer work dried up because I couldn't meet with anybody. I couldn't give anybody a ride. I couldn't teach anybody, at least not for the first few months, because everything was shut down. So I didn't have any volunteer work to go. And I was still writing newspaper articles, but I was doing those mostly by phone and by email, occasionally going and taking person's pictures, but because I do the photography as well as the writing. But yeah, COVID got my novel finished much quicker than I would have otherwise.
How much different is it writing for the newspaper than it is writing for yourself?
Well, the writing for newspaper is most of the stories I get are space limited. They like me to keep it to 1,000 words or fewer. And sometimes maybe on a real complicated thing, they'll let me go up to 1,200 words, but not usually. So how do you tell a fairly complicated story in 1,000 words or 800 words, 900 words? So newspaper writing really gets you to condense, to write, to get to the meat of the story. Whenever I write a story, there's probably 20 things I could have put in the story, but I didn't, because you've only got so much space. So you have to decide what's important, what do the readers want to read, and how can I do that in this amount of space? Occasionally they'll let me go crazy, but for the most part, most of the stories are limited by space. And so writing for a newspaper really makes you into a much more careful writer, which actually has helped my writing novels. Although with novels, I can go as long as I want. I realized the need to cut. For example, my first novel was, as I said, 73,000 words. My original draft was 105,000. So I cut out 30,000. Yeah, I went through and cut out 30,000 words. And I don't think I lost anything. In fact, I gained. In writing, at least for the type of writing I do, less is more. You don't want to, for example, and in fact, my first editor said this. In the first novel, I've got a bed bath scene where the home health aide is giving somebody a bed bath. In my first draft, I went on for 10 pages. So my editor wrote back and said, are you kidding me? This is so boring. People aren't going to get past this. So I condensed what was 10 pages into 2. And I had similar, I went through the whole book and did stuff like that. Anything that you tend to be a little bit redundant. So I was able to cut out 30,000 words. And I think the book is better than it was before I cut them.
That's awesome. Did it take you a long time to kind of understand like what it takes to actually make a book compelling to the audience, or like what's worth keeping, what's worth cutting? It does. It take you a while to kind of develop?
Well, prior to my 2 novels that are printed, I said I wrote the one long one, which was terrible. And then I wrote actually another one. It took me 4 years, terrible. But I learned from my mistakes. I mean, I learned it's important to show more than tell. Not the saying that telling. An example would that be, say some guy gets some bad news, and you can say, so-and-so got bad news. Or you can say, when he heard the news, he put his fist through the wall. That's showing versus telling. So what I learned over the writing these books is how to show. Not to say there are times in the book, especially in dialogue, when you tell. But for the most part, you need to show. You also need to figure out, one of the hardest things I had for both books is when I write dialogue, I'm writing it, and I go through it. I say, wait a minute, they all sound like me. So I had to go through both books and try to make each individual speaker an individual speaker and not just regurgitating the way I would speak. And in the second novel, one of the hardest thing for me to do, and it was fairly difficult, was the priest to deal with issues of doubt and of faith and of belief in God and belief and try to deal with why the bad things happen to good people. So how to get those complicated issues into a format that's not boring and not heavy-handed and basically not preaching. So that was the hardest thing, fairly complicated and issues that I wanted to make sure that they were simply told. So it's important to tell a story simply. And my books, I don't use, I bet if you did one of those tests where you figure out the grade level, I bet mine 8th or 9th grade. I don't go into this long words that people have to look up in the dictionary. I can't stand that. And so mine books read pretty simply.
That's my kind of reading.
Then I can understand. Yeah, I was going to say that I can understand it.
I was reading, I'm not going to say who the author was, but a book. Oh my goodness, I'm at the dictionary every 5th page for something. I'm in Latin and don't tell you what it means. I mean, what? I don't know what this Latin means. So then I go to the computer and I translate it. But if you're going to throw in Latin or even French in a book, give us what it means. There is, in my second book, there is a part where the priest is teaching Latin to the altar boys, and he does say something in Latin, but then you get the English. Then I work in the English. He'll say something and he'll look for a response, and the boys don't respond correctly. So they say, look, this is what it means. And he tells it. So I make sure that I've got not a lot of Latin, but there is a back and forth between a priest and altar boys. So every time I did a Latin phrase, I did explain it. I had read a book recently. My goodness, there was so much Latin in the book. I'm thinking, who is this for? Nobody takes Latin anymore. When I was a kid, I was an altar boy and I had to learn all that Latin stuff, but I don't think they do anymore. They've done the English Mass in Catholic churches since 1964, 63. No altar boys since then. I've had to learn that.
Right.
But I don't like books where they throw in foreign words and they don't tell you what they are.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And making it simple for the audience too, so that they can actually take something away. Because I can't tell you how many times I've read books like you were saying, and I'm not one that goes to the dictionary, so I'm just like, okay, whatever that V word was, we're just gonna skip over that one. And then every time I come to it,
I don't go to the dictionary all the time too. Usually I try to put in context. Let's see, what does that mean? Okay. And if it's really bugging me, I'll go to the dictionary, but I try not to very often. But sometimes it just doesn't make sense. I mean, read a sentence like, this guy sure is a heck smarter than I am. But yeah. I don't know who the audience is. It isn't me.
Yeah, 100%. Do you have any goals for your writing for, the next several years? Anything you'd like to accomplish?
I just finished a novel recently, and I'm in the proofreading stage. I've had some beta readers read it, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. I may submit it somewhere, I may not, but it's about how adults have turned youth sports into a profession. All the travel teams and all that nonsense. I was a coach for 25 years. I coached middle level soccer. I did girls for 14 years and boys for 11. So yeah, I don't know, it was 9. Anyway, I did girls and boys both. And I saw an evolution over that time period of the 25 years that I was coaching. I saw where more and more kids were coming from these travel teams. And their skills were greater, but it was making it for the kids who didn't have the money at a real huge disadvantage. The kids who played 12 months a year soccer from the time they were 6 until they came to my team at 13 and 14 years old were simply better than the kids who only played rec ball in the fall. And
Right.
so this book is kind of about, is this really a good idea? Plus, it's expensive. And my own daughter, her kids do it. My grandson, when he was like 10 or 11 years old, he was on a travel ice hockey team in New Hampshire. They even had a tournament in Florida. You have to fly down there with your kid. That's pretty darn expensive. And one day they'd be in Montreal in a tournament. The next day they'd be in Boston. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? This is really expensive. So, and those travel teams, I don't know about your areas, but they have absolutely dominated. And mostly in our area, it's mostly ice hockey, basketball, and soccer. Not so much for baseball, but those other 3 sports, the kids get in them and they specialize. They don't play the 3 or 4 sports anymore. They play the one.
Yeah.
So that's what the book's about. I'm done it. I'm in the proofreading stage. We'll see. I haven't decided whether I like the book yet or not. Usually after I write it, I like it and then I hate it. Then I like it. Then I hate it. So I go back and forth. And right now I'm in, I don't know. So I've been rewriting it and I'm adding stuff that I think the characters, one of my beta readers told me that all the men in the book come across as idiots. So I'm trying to tone down their stupidity.
Well, I know it does, because so both of my daughters played travel softball. My son played a little bit of travel baseball, and you are correct. I'm down in Georgia, so softball, baseball, basketball are the big ones down here, and it gets very, very expensive, especially a lot of the softball, because they don't have as much opportunity. People don't come to watch softball as much as for college, let's say, as they do for baseball. So they have to go out to try and get notice, at least to get, scholarships in college for playing softball.
Well, I mean, on the people who put the money into it, the bottom line is the college coaches are going to those games more than they're going to high school games.
Yep.
For us, baseball's pretty minimal in Vermont. The season's short, but ice hockey, soccer, they just go on and on. And then soccer goes indoors in the winter. But yeah, I mean, I think I like a lot of it. And this isn't against the leagues. They do great coaching. They have great programs. They're very positive with the kids. It's just, it's sports is now a profession. Youth sports is a profession. It's not a game kids play. It's a game that they play and their adults watch them. I mean, when was the last time, I don't know about your area, I can't remember the last time I saw a bunch of kids just choosing up sides and playing a game of anything. It's almost always with an adult and a clipboard watching them do what they do. I mean, kids, when I was a kid, I'm older than you guys, every single night. I lived right next door to the high school, and there were 3 baseball every single night in the summer. There'd be like 50 guys, and we would divide up into 4 games or 3 games, and we'd play every night. Never. You go to the high school field now, there's nobody playing. The only time they play is when they got their uniform on and their coach is taking them somewhere. Just to play sandlot. Sandlot doesn't, in my area, maybe it does in yours. In our area, sandlot balls doesn't exist anymore.
No, I mean, you're again down here, with so much travel ball being going on, a lot of what is considered the quote unquote public parks, are loaded with travel ball teams getting practice and stuff. So you're right. The opportunity to just get a bunch of people together and go, hey, let's go to the baseball field, or let's go shoot hoops, or let's go something like that. Yeah, it's not as readily available as it was when we were younger.
And I don't know what the answer is, because the bottom line, the kids who go through those programs are certainly highly skilled. When I first started coaching, we've been in, I don't know, 89 maybe. 89, I think. The kids came with very little skills. By the time I quit, they had more skills than I had. I mean, because they had been playing so much. I mean, the kids now in soccer are so much better than my generation. Not so much for baseball, I think that's about even. And basketball, I suppose they're better too, because they play so much. But the kids who don't play, even if sometimes it isn't just money. Sometimes you got a family with 6 kids. Well, how can they can't be at 6 places at once, so they can't do it. So I think the travel teams reward the kids who can go there, but are a bit of a disadvantage for the kids who, for whatever reason, can't.
Very true. Very, very true. I can't disagree with you. I agree 100%.
So if I decide to submit this, one thing about, I don't know how much you're going to, it's like a 2-year process. By the time I submit it, the time it's published, it's a long, long time. So assuming I decide to send it somewhere, maybe next fall, it probably wouldn't be available till, what are we now, 24, 26 maybe? That would be the
Yeah.
probable date would be 26.
Oh, wow.
What takes so long? Is it like editing or trying to find
Yeah.
or
Yeah. It takes a while for the company to get back to you, for one thing. You send it in, and when I sent it in April, I think they got back to me in like July. And then you find an editor a couple months after that. And then you go back and forth with the editor. That's 6 months. So now you're about close to a year. And then they have to get design people and legal people and all that. So my experience is it takes anywhere from 12 months to 18 months by the time you submit your manuscript to the time it's actually published. My second one didn't take as long, but partially because I switched companies and I went to a Vermont company right near my hometown. So it was quicker. So the first one, I submitted the book in October, and it's going to be printed next week. I mean, it's already printed. It's going to be available to the public next week. So that's not even a year. So I'll probably stick with for the local company, I think.
nice?
That's really good.
That must be an amazing feeling to like actually have a piece of work that you've done published and like out there in the world for people to enjoy, pick up and read, and like really just take them away from whatever they're currently feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just get lost in a book.
Yeah, I agree. And then especially when you get nice comments back. Most of the I got some awful nice comments from people who worked in the visiting nurse field. I had quite a few home health aides. My book is about a home health aide and home health nurses, actually, and even a few home health physical therapists, send me notes, call me and say, look, I really identified with that. I can identify with those people, and I can identify with that staff. So that's nice. I mean, you obviously, no matter what you write, you're going to get some negative stuff. You just kind of have to go with the flow on that. So it wasn't very realistic, or that kind of stuff. I've gotten 10 wonderful comments to every negative comment for that book, and we'll see what happens with the second book.
I'm sure
Really
it'll be
good.
just as great. So we have a couple segments we like to do towards the end of the podcast.
Okay.
The first one is called No Dumb Questions, where we
Okay.
take a audience member's question, and they are able to basically ask anything they want, regardless of how smart or dumb it is. So this week, the question is, they'd like to know what it's like to live in Vermont, and do you have any hobbies there? Do you collect anything? Tell us about Vermont.
Well, Vermont's probably not much different than living anyplace else. We do have 4 seasons. Some places don't. The last few years, we've been much rainier than ever. We've had floods over the last 3 years in a row. It's just crazy. Vermont is a good place if you like the outdoors. My wife and I, we kayak. There's great hiking. We bike. So that we went to the dark side a couple of years ago. We got the electric aided bikes because we're getting a little old in the hills. Vermont's a really hilly place to bike. So when we bike, so if you like the outdoors, Vermont's a good place to live. And she said, do I collect anything? Was that one of the part of the question?
Yeah.
Not
Do you
really.
collect anything over here? No.
Not really. I sell photo in addition to writing. In the last couple of years, when I had my first book, I decided I wanted to sell it at craft fairs, Christmas craft fairs, see if I could sell it. So my wife told me, if all you have is one book on your table, you're going to look like an idiot. So I've been taking lots of pictures over the years, and I've been selling those. And actually, those sell as well or better than the books. I've got an Instagram under my name if anybody wants to check out some of my pictures. But so I go to like 3 Christmas craft shows a year, and I sell photos and books. And this year I should have 2 books to sell, and then my photos. I have lots of. They're mostly Vermont themed photos. I tried selling other stuff. People come to Vermont Craft Share. They don't want to buy other stuff. They want to buy Vermont. They want to buy foliage. I don't know if anybody knows about our foliage, but it's pretty beautiful in October here in Vermont. As everything the trees turn red and gold and yellow.
Yeah,
and that's the pictures that sell. And that and winter scenes sell. So I have a lot of winter scenes and foliage scenes that I sell, and it's been fun. It's turned me into retirement. I used to take pictures casually. Now I actually go out and purposely look for certain things to take pictures. I don't do people too much. Well, at least I don't sell stuff. I sell Vermont-based photos with Vermont themes.
That's really good.
That's really cool, though. That's an incredible use of your surroundings and also like your skill set and just your interests. So that's really
If
cool.
anybody wants to either read,
man, like I never even thought of that.
well, if somebody wants to look at both either the pictures or even read the first 2 chapters of both books, if you go on my webpage, which is jpetercobb.com, I had to throw in the J there for internet reasons. Someone had already registered petercobb.com, so I had my first name is Joseph, although nobody knows that. So at jpeter.com, you can read the first 2 chapters of both of the first 2 books. You can get an idea whether you like it, and I think my Instagram link is on there, and you can see some of the photos that I've taken.
Awesome. And I'll link them both in the Spotify and on YouTube. We have one final question for you that we normally end the podcast with. It's a segment called We Have to Ask, but You Do Not Have to Answer. So
Okay.
the question we have for you today, and again, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. Sometimes they're crazy, sometimes they're not. But what is on your bucket list? And Michael wants to know, what's the strangest thing on your bucket list?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have anything particular. I hate to say it, but I don't think I have anything particularly strange on my bucket list. My wife and I just got back from Scotland, which was on our bucket list. And so we either want to go to maybe Greece or Ireland, or possibly hiking up in Washington State. We had planned on hiking there and just didn't work out. And we also want to drive to Nova Scotia. Is about a 12-hour drive from here. But if you drive to Portland, Maine, you can take a ferry and you're on the boat for most of it. No, so those are on bucket list. As for weird stuff, I don't know. I wish I'm not creative enough to think about weird stuff on my bucket list, I guess. Like we had planned on going to Big Bend National Park the COVID year, and everything got canceled. So we might try to get back there. We've never been not back there. We might try to get there. But that was canceled because of the COVID business. So I'd like to see more of Europe if I can. Although we found, I'm 72, I'm going to be 73. Traveling seems to be more and more tiring. Once you're getting there and coming home. Plus, we missed our flight coming home, so we were stuck in Frankfurt, Germany for a day, and we were in line for like 10 hours changing our flights. It was just awful, and it was totally exhausting. But the trip in Scotland was worth it. If any of you are looking for great places to visit, boy, Scotland is gorgeous.
I'm putting that on my bucket list right now. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah. Start in Edinburgh, which is beautiful, and then go north. Don't drive unless you feel comfortable driving on the wrong side of the road. Oh, we went on a bus tour. I would have killed myself if I had driven there. Of course, they think we're on the wrong side of the road, but I don't think I would have felt comfortable driving there.
Yeah, that totally would feel kind of weird. So I really appreciate your time today. It's been wonderful. Where can people listening find your books?
It'll be on Amazon for one, and it'll be on Ingram. I think it's called Ingram, but Amazon is the easiest place to get it. If you're in Vermont, it's going to be in the local bookstores. And if you go to your local bookstore and ask, no matter where it is, they can. If you go to your local bookstore in Georgia, for example, say, I want this book, it's on Ingram, so they can get it. But if they don't want to go to the local bookstore, they can go on Amazon. It's available on Amazon now, just that they won't ship it to you until the 27th. So if you want to pre-order, the first book's already there. But if you want to pre-order the second book, and I should tell you, I think the second book is much better, partially because you get better as you do stuff. My writing skills, I think, improved dramatically from the first book to the second.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's
guys, if
fantastic.
you
Oh,
have the opportunity, make sure you go onto Amazon or any of those other places to find this book. It's going to be coming out the exact same day we drop this episode. So if you're listening to this, that means the book is already out. You can order it, and Amazon delivers really fast, so you can have that book in your hands before you know it. Michael, let me ask you this: do you have any final questions for Peter before we let him go?
No, not really. I just, I just really to say thank you again for taking time out of your busy day and stuff to go ahead and sit and talk with us. It was great getting the perspective of, of the retirement stuff. It's something that Anthony and I were talking about, before you came on, is that, I mean, like I'm getting close to that point, and to your point about, you know, having something to do, having a place, either a place to be or so and so, and then all of a sudden one day you don't. I mean,
of course, you've
honestly, I
got this
didn't.
podcast.
Honestly, I didn't think about that.
Well, you've got this podcast, though. You can do this right on through. You
Well,
know?
true, definitely true. So, but the other part, like you said about the one thing that you said, that there's the word that you said, and even and in the little thing you wrote to Anthony is that's kind of like, depending on where you are, you know, no matter what it is, even if you're not, you believe you're super relevant and super irreplaceable, and then the next day you're gone.
You're gone. You are gone in your history, and in a year, your history. You're
Right.
gone and remembered, and maybe 2 years your history, but you're gone
Yeah.
quickly, and you're forgotten
Yep.
more quickly than you thought. But
Yeah, but-
also, just a couple things. If people are looking at the book, even though on the screen it says Peter Cobb, you got to look for J. Peter Cobb, because that's what the book's under, and that's for reasons that aren't important. And the name of the book is Some Things Aren't Meant to Be.
But again, thank you very
so
much.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
Thank you. Much
It's our
appreciated.
pleasure. We really appreciate it, Peter. Guys, if you could go and take a look at this book, and also go and follow Michael over at Huddle Card Collection. If you haven't subscribed over to Picksburgh on YouTube, where we're going to release the video format of this, make sure you come over there and subscribe as well. Till the next podcast, guys, we appreciate you listening. May God bless you. Take it easy.
From the city, I'm from the city, the city is. I'm from the city is.